One of the most wonderful places in the world to visit is Israel. In Israel, of course, the most wonderful place to visit is Jerusalem. And in Jerusalem, one of the greatest places that you could ever visit is the Wall. This is known as the Western Wall. It's also known as the Wailing Wall. The reason it's known as the Wailing Wall is because for hundreds of years, there was only a very small portion of this wall exposed for Jewish visitors to visit. They could not go in many other places of the city because it was under the control of the Ottoman Empire for hundreds of years, and the Muslims were controlling the top of the Temple Mount. But there was a little alley, just a small, narrow place where a few Jews could gather and pray and wail. And so it became known as the Wailing Wall. Even today, Jews come to this place, and to them, this is the most holy place in the world because it's the closest they can get to where the temple was built. Now, Jesus said, when his disciples came to him and said, "Lord, look at all these buildings, and aren't these magnificent?" He said that I tell you, not one stone will be left upon another. So what does that mean? And why are these stones still standing? These stones are standing because these were not the stones of the temple. This was not the temple. This was not the wall of the temple. This was not the western wall of the temple. This is the wall of the Temple Mount. In other words, this was a retainer wall. And what you see here on ground level, for the first 7 layers of stone, was built by Herod the Great in about 19 or 20 BC. So 20 years before Jesus Christ was born, these stones were built as part of Herod's massive building project. He's called Herod the Great, not because he was such a great man. He had a lot of people murdered, including his own sons and his own wife. But he was great because he was a builder, and he left magnificent buildings. This is a part of Herod's legacy. He built the Temple Mount and enlarged it greater than what Solomon had built originally, greater than what had been rebuilt under Hezekiah and under the returned Jews when they came back from exile, and the Hasmoneans. And so of this wall, what you see standing here at the Western Wall Plaza, by the way, when the Jews took over this area in 1967, they tore down the buildings that had been standing here and that had only allowed a few people at a time in here. And they made this massive Western Wall Plaza. So standing on this level today is not the same level that Jesus and his apostles would have stood on 2,000 years ago. In fact, the street level at that time was many feet lower than what we are right now. These stones go another 43 feet below the current ground level. So what we're seeing from the remains of Herod's temple, or the Temple Mount that was enlarged by Herod, are actually 7 courses of stones. These first 7 stones were built by Herod during the time of Herod. And then above that, there are 4 more courses that were built about in the 600s by the Umayyad Caliph, and they are existing from that time. Above the 4 layers of stones from the Umayyad Empire are 14 courses of stones. The smaller stones that you see up on top, that were built by the Ottomans in 1866. And then right at the very top of that are 3 smaller rows of stones that were built by the Sunni Muslim cleric before the 1967 war. So this composes what's known as the Western Wall. And it is where people come, and Jews especially come and worship. They leave prayer requests in the cracks between the stones. Now, the cracks between the stones are there due to erosion, animals, plants. A bird will drop a seed and a root will form and a tree or a bush will grow. And you can see some of these existing in the wall today. But the stones that were laid by Herod over 2,000 years ago were so tightly put together that you cannot even slip a piece of paper between them. That's how tight they were. The craftsmanship was superb. And yet, people will come and leave prayer requests. These prayer requests are cleaned out of the stones, I think at least twice a year. Somebody comes through and they take all the prayer requests and they handle them respectfully, and I think they bury them in a sacred place. As popular as this place is, and as much as I love coming here, there is a part of the wall that I prefer to visit. And this is the part of the wall that I take guests that travel with me to the Holy Land. That is the southern wall. And here's the reason for that. When Jesus and the apostles were here, as I said, they were never at this level. The street level was way down below us. So they never touched these stones. They no doubt saw them, but they did not touch them. They did not run their hands along the roughness of the face. However, there is a part of the wall that is on the same level and the same entrance where Jesus and the apostles would have walked, leaned against, taught from, and that is at the southern steps. At the southern steps, there's this massive stairway that is existing from the time of Jesus, and many of these steps are still original. When we go there with groups, we come up these steps reading the Psalms of Ascent. And the way that these steps are designed is that there will be a couple of shorter steps and then one larger platform. This was made for a couple of reasons. First of all, it's designed so that you have to stoop as you climb. You're bowing in reverence toward the temple. But also, it's designed so that you will pause and contemplate and reflect and meditate. And the Jewish pilgrims, when they would come to the temple during times of praise and worship and gathering, including the Feast of Pentecost, they would sing the Psalms of Ascent and pray them and worship God on their approach up to the temple. So remember this, at the Western Wall, Jesus and his apostles and the people from his day did not touch those stones on that level. But on the southern steps, these are the very steps. Some of them are original from the times of Jesus. And when you walk these steps, you can imagine Jesus walking these very steps, the apostles walking these very steps. You can imagine Jesus teaching from these steps because this was a main entrance into the temple. You can imagine the apostles gathered together right here in this area and teaching people. And many believe that it was near here, very close to here, that the Holy Ghost was poured out and the crowd would have been gathered together. So when you come up these steps, the southern steps, and approach the temple, these stones right on the bottom are from Herod's building program, and these are the stones that the apostles would have touched and Jesus would have touched on their way into the temple.